Hello, I'm David Coulthard, and...
You're giving me some limelight today. DC, it's EJ here, and we have our customary little growl together. Just to wake everybody up. Can you please say FFS for me again?
Welcome to FFS. It's still so difficult.
Why is it so difficult?
My tongue was trained to do different things.
Of that I've no doubt. But anyway, please move on. This is not that kind of show, DC.
Right, well, good that we're in agreement there. So, look, we're together this week, but we're not going to be alone because we're going to be joined shortly by someone who not only survived Jordan Grand Prix, but was a key part of its success. And that person is Giselle Davies.
What an absolute megastar. This Giselle Davies, who we're going to hear from very shortly. And believe it or not, DC, not often do I get really excited, but I'm excited about seeing Gigi again because she was a class act. She made me do things that I never thought I could possibly do or wanted to do, but she had a way of cunningly being able to circumvent situations that she knew that I wouldn't want to get out of. So she was a very smart cookie.
Well, I look forward to interrogating her soon.
Oh,
But before we do,
will.
yes, indeed. Look, a couple of questions from our anchors, and this one's from William. Now, he asks, with what has happened to Sergio Perez this season, and why do you think Red Bull chose to extend his contract with the team?
Well, if that was now, I mean, when they extended it, I presume was the negotiations were around the Monaco time, and we know what a great driver he was, usually in the wet or when tire situations became. But you know, that's all eliminated itself out of the situation. So the clear path that he had on street circuits, he doesn't have anymore. He's lost, in my opinion, he's lost his mojo. Whether he's under pressure, since this has been announced that he has renewed the contract, I see a distinct lack of performance, David. And I have to call to question, why is that? What has happened? Because it should be quite the reverse. You get a new contract and you say, wow, let me make the maximum out of this. Let me win sort of races. Let me fight for the championships. Just like Nico Rosberg did with Lewis Hamilton. For heaven's sake, he's got the same car as Max Verstappen. But, you know, only last week when we discussed this in the previous podcast, you know, he was a lap off the qualifying of his teammate. That's unacceptable. It's just not possible.
Difficult to try and understand where pace goes. And there's a couple of drivers that's up and down the pit lane. Checo being one, that it seems that he's slipped a little bit in relative pace to his teammate. Daniel Ricciardo, where all eyes on him because of the fact that Tsunoda seems to be just marginally quicker, which either means that Tsunoda is top drawer, and he may well be, or Daniel is just not quite at one with this generation of car.
Well, it appears that he's not possibly enjoying these cars, and maybe the 26 car will be a new revelation for him. But there's another person that I have in huge quantum of esteem for, and that is Alex Albon. Where has he gone in the last race or two? I mean, really, he is magic in my opinion, and he can do almost anything in that car, and could be, if he was in a top 2 or top 3 teams, he would be right at the forefront of the championship.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll watch how those guys develop during the course of the season. All eyes on Checo Perez, must be feeling the heat. We've got a second question here from Gavin Moffat, and it's to you, EJ, about Andrea de Cesaris, excuse me. Actually, we just saw, coming off the most recent Grand Prix I was at in Austria, images of him rolling his car multiple times. Sadly, lost his life in a motorbike accident in Rome, I believe. But the question was, what was it that swung you signing him for 1991? I suspect it was money rather than his
believe
speed.
In this case, David, you're wrong. Yet again, it's not all about the money. In this case, but I had a huge affection for Formula 3. I think I've made that clear in the past. And in the year 79, when I was competing with Stefan Johansson as a teammate, also in a Marlboro car with Tiger, which was Howden Ganley, and the team was run by was Andrea de Cesaris. And I thought, if Andrea could be curtailed and put in a certain framework and given the total belief and, arm around the shoulder and that sort of thing. Here was a guy who had unbelievable talent, and that's exactly what happened. He was a revelation. He came to me. They used to call him the Crasherus. But we had been friends from all of those days, years gone by. I believed in him. And it's one of those things you can't put your finger on it. You never know why you can believe in somebody. You just feel it or you don't feel it. It's actually buried somewhere in the midst of your body. And I believed in Andrea. It was incredibly sad when he died. I remember Nicky Lauda, myself, Emanuele Pirro, and we all trooped off to Rome because he was on a motorbike accident in the Peripherik in Roma. And, terrible, sad loss of life. He was just such a magic guy.
Well, in his memory. Okay, listeners, we're going to move this along now, and I think it's time to bring in our special guest for this week, a lady that has endured many big personalities in Formula
Wow.
1, but primarily the nutter beside me, Eddie Jordan.
Well,
so
not exclusively.
Please welcome Giselle.
Woo!
And this is really interesting, actually, because Eddie has been particularly excited about our next guest.
Absolutely.
Giselle, who's sitting here in front of us, she's come armed with many a magazine, which I can only imagine are examples of things that she managed to... her great work in persuading you the importance of getting column inches. And there's also a brilliant picture, which is like a blueprint of showing what a Formula One driver wears. You're going to have to take our word for this, listeners. We've got images of Giancarlo Fisichella basically stripped to his underwear, and in various images as he's getting built into being a Grand Prix driver with his helmet on. But anyway, I'm waffling. I've been distracted by one of the inappropriate images from the early days of the buzzing hornets, and it looks like it might be Jordan, the former Page 3 girl, modelling something. You were always I always thought it was you, EJ, but actually what I'm realising, it was Giselle that was responsible for getting the column inches.
Well, inches were always never something I was heavily involved with, as you can well imagine. And Giselle was, and she enjoyed that part of it, and she got lots of column inches.
Didn't we always have an argument, Eddie, about who made who? I think. Did you make,
well, it depends on who's speaking. It usually was me. So anyway, Giselle, please go ahead. Listen to him, not to me.
Okay, Giselle, you endured not only Flavio Briatore, a larger-than-life character. Not content with that, you're like, okay, I want to further test my armory, my ability to deal with madness, and you join Jordan and the journey there. And there's many great examples of your great work there. But let's just take it back to why. What did he do to persuade you to join? And just what was that whole experience like? Because I'm constantly telling our listeners that this man is unhinged. I'm so happy I never worked with him. I survived for motor racing without ever having to sign a contract with this man.
Yeah, good questions. Actually, I was lucky to end up at Jordan, and I was there at great timings. I know, but because he kind of let's start being nice to him. He saved me because I started with, as you said, with Flavio Briatore and Benetton. I started midway through the 96 season with Benetton, and totally naive about Formula One. Had literally no idea about the sport. Really wondered how on earth I'd got this job. My first Grand Prix, Barcelona, I remember the race. I watched it from the press room, the big press room that overlooks, the Circuito de Catalunya. Yeah. It was this pouring rain. Because I kind of didn't know where I was meant to be. I knew what I had to do. I had to get quotes from the drivers after the race, but it was like straight into this first race, and here we go. And there's this red car in the pouring rain that's out clearly well ahead of the others.
Yeah, I crashed before the first corner, by the way.
Did you? Oh, so you don't, yeah. It was awful.
I was watching with you. Not literally, but I was watching.
And do you remember a certain Michael Schumacher way out in front? But I had no idea. So I remember asking one of the journalists in the press room, how naive. So who's the guy in the red car? I mean, that's how little I knew about it. Anyway, I was in at the deep end, had to learn the ropes very, very quickly. Was very naive because Benetton had been the champions the year before, and then they were going through hell that year. I can tell you a story later about Gerhard Berger and
oh, yes,
John
please.
Lacey.
Oh, yes, please.
But they were having a bad time. And then it only lost half a season because Flavio decided that they needed to cut back the staff because they'd gone from world champions to suddenly not doing so well. So there I was thinking, this seemed quite fun, this F1 gig. But, And luckily, at Jordan, Louise Goodman was leaving to go to ITV, and one thing led to another, and I met the irrepressible Eddie, and before I knew it, I was joining the Jordan Grand Prix team.
What was the job interview like?
Yeah. You know what? I think it must have been so traumatic that I don't actually remember it. I genuinely don't remember.
Do it. He probably just pointed at you and said, "You're starting on Monday."
I think it was a bit like that. I remember coming to the Jordan factory. I remember meeting Ian Phillips, being very concerned about the fact, because I was quite a goody two-shoes and he used to chain smoke. And I thought, I've got to sit with this guy who's just like one after the other. How am I going to manage to do that? And you had the office with Lindsay off Ian's office. And so you used to come in and out, this flurry of craziness. And I was like, okay, well, whatever. This Formula One thing's going to be fun. Let's roll with it, see what happens. And just kind of learnt on the job.
You learnt on the job, and then in many ways, I guess, this was a great place to be creative. Like we're seeing all of these examples of column inches, which were beyond the team's success. Normally, you only get that kind of exposure if you're delivering. So how did you sort of pick up the reins and go, all right, I'm going to shake this tree?
So I think the beauty was that actually Jordan Grand Prix was the David to the Goliaths of the other teams in the paddock. And thankfully, we had the most charismatic team boss. He was one of few private
Yeah, but you also had Eddie. That was the problem.
Oh, can you be quiet, DC? I'm doing my best here to shut up.
It was more about having to tame him than anything else. I think he was so quixotic, and the media loved him because it added the colour and the flavour and all that. So actually, my job was to just kind of be the slightly bossy, annoying, and I was young, so you kind of do things when you're young that you'd never do later because you're just a bit braver, I think, and you're a bit...
You don't know what you don't know.
That's exactly it. You don't know what you don't know. I told you about Gerhard earlier, Gerhard Berger, the year before
I'm sure
at Benetton.
He liked you.
Well, there's this quote I found in
There's
an old...
absolutely no doubt about that.
Yeah, well, an old diary of mine where I said, right, Gerhard, you've been making the media wait for an hour and a half. You've really got to do these interviews now. And he said, oh, do I have a new boss now? And I said, yes, it's me. Things that, because I didn't know who he was. I just... you just kind of like, we have to do this, you have to do it now. And it was like that with Eddie. It's like he would want to wander off or be in the wrong place. And I'd go and drag you, wouldn't I, Eddie, from all sorts, I don't know, you'd be chatting away in another motorhome when you should be in the Jordan one. And
God,
we just
I can
kind
only
of
imagine it must have been such a relief when you were dragging them somewhere that you were assured to feel it was his hand you were dragging him by, because this man, he's a loose cannon. How long did you actually stay within the Jordan family?
So I was there from 97 and left in 2002, which were fantastic years. I mean, I think I really was fortunate.
The winning years.
They were winning years, exactly. We got the fantastic sponsorship in from Benson & Hedges and Deutsche Post, Recent Technologies, DHL. Yeah, so it was years where the money was coming in, which I think you've covered nicely in an earlier podcast. There were years that wasn't the case. So, I managed in my contract negotiations, I got tipped off by John Postlethwaite from Benetton to say, make sure when you're in your interview with Eddie that you get your business class travel tickets when you travel. Otherwise, he's going to want you down the back of the bus. So I did, get a proper contract, get a proper job, was paid always on time. And, survived those years through the wins, through the 1-2 in Spa, and then the other races in the other years.
Well, actually, I thought you were going... Because when I was speaking to you some time ago... DC, you wanted to say that, one, he caused the biggest crash of Formula One ever. And he, to your memory and my memory, he's the only person that had another driver and a competitor chase him down the pit lane and wanted to beat the head off him, because that's never happened before either. And he had them all in the same weekend. I mean, DC, can we talk about that?
Well, look, what I'd really like to talk about is that the fact that I'm sensing that you've got some really good, juicy gossip on EJ, because he's the only other time I've seen him sit sort of so quietly was when we had his lovely wife on the show, and Eddie was like, it was almost like he was trying to not even breathe. He just wanted the episode to be over. So give us some gossip on EJ. Like, did you have to effectively? Eddie's sometimes a little bit economical with the truth. Did you ever find yourself having to not? I would never use the word lie, but did you ever have to lie on his behalf?
We were creative, I think, on a number of occasions.
You
Maybe
never
we put it
get
like
around
that.
The fear on his face.
I
yeah.
mean, and I think he was so excited and excitable. It's like a young puppy, I remember in those days. And especially when we had, we did specific marketing campaigns that were very much led by M&C Saatchi's sponsorship at the time for Benson Hedges that did involve some gorgeous girls. And in those days, that was felt to be fine. And they were the Jordan Pit girls. And as you mentioned, David, we had Katie Price almost before she became Jordan and before she'd done any cosmetic surgery. And she was very, very, very pretty young woman. And some other well-known models who used to sort of embellish the car. And, so I had to sort of just keep Eddie, keep him calm, keep him in the zone, keep him as the formula, rather than, just keep him a little bit together in those moments. Is that fair, Eddie?
Well, you had positioned these girls in all sorts of posture, hanging over the car from one way to the other, and you'd have me positioned in a photograph, and it was just impossible to be straight. So I was looking up for divine intervention. I was looking up to heaven all the time. So because if I looked down, I just couldn't tell you what I was about to say. So anyway, that was the best way. But truthfully, let's move away from that a little bit, because there was some amazing, and a great friend of yours, Guy Liberté, who owned Cirque du Soleil, Giselle, put on that programme not far from here at the Royal Albert Hall, where we did a United, and they were doing something that they were promoting their show, which was a Christmas show every year, a Cirque du Soleil. And we said, well, why don't you just marry the launch of the Jordan team, which will be in March or February, whenever, and you put that together. And that was just unbelievable, because people had never really ever seen a Formula One car launch like that before.
Yeah. To this day, the launch of that Jordan 198 is probably one of the highlights of my career. I used the word career. It's a bit, it was one of the moments. And I remember getting home after that busy day where we'd had, as you say, the Royal Albert Hall packed, the Cirque du Soleil show, and then this car that literally descended from the heavens of the Royal Albert Hall down into the middle of the auditorium. And I turned on the news after that crazy day, and we were on the third lead item on the headline news that evening. So it was whatever else was happening in the world, 1, 2, and then Damon Hill and Jordan Grand Prix at the Royal Albert Hall tonight. And I thought, oh, wow, I'm in the business of public relations and communications. I think, I should stop now. It's not going to get better than this. Yeah. And I think that was all. That was the, that showed, I think, a number of things that came together. Interest for, to be fair to him, Eddie, interest for Jordan as the underdog, and the fact that we'd signed Damon Hill that year obviously brought a tremendous amount of UK focus, but also the creativity around that launch that we did with our sponsors. We were known. It actually says in that piece something about if they, for podium successes, if it was to be given for the brilliance of their launches, Jordan would be in pole position and be champion winners.
So I guess that's one of the things, and one of the things I've always loved about Formula One is it brings the best of people across all of the different careers that you can have within the sport. So whether it's catering, whether it's media, whether it's marketing, whether it's design, whether it's driving, it really is a very addictive place to live. And everyday life can be a little bit underwhelming in comparison. So this roller coaster of that rock and roll time of Jordan, and we've kind of gone away from that a little bit in Formula One of late. So do you feel that you lived and were creative in a period of the best of Formula One?
Totally. Everything you've just explained is exactly how it was. It was you lived and breathed it day in, day out. And it was a combination of extremely glamorous moments where you would do star spotting and see Michael and Catherine Douglas on the grid before the start of the race. Or I remember sitting in the motorhome in Montreal, Eddie, do you remember, with Bryan Adams? That was definitely a moment I kind of pinched myself and thought, I'm sitting in this little motorhome and I can almost touch Bryan Adams and we're kind of shooting the breeze, watching it. No,
please, David.
I would have touched Bryan Adams.
Should have asked him for his autograph or something. But I remember it in my mind how cool it was because I had his, I think it was DVDs by that day. We're not all that old, but CDs rather. So it was all the glamour, but it was also the hard work. And to your point, David, one of the things I loved about Formula One is how you've got this melange, this mix of people who do all sorts of different jobs, and we're all together and you're all in a team. And we definitely had at Jordan that amazing team spirit, and it's the highs and lows and all of that. And it's true, I have to say, pretty much since leaving Formula One, and certainly now, I mean, don't ask me a question about Formula One now. I don't follow it at all. Maybe because it was such an intense experience at the time and I loved it so much, and then life moved on. But
but I think I can relate to that, and I'm sure Eddie can, because when you sold the team, you know, you're not going to all the Grand Prix. You were more engaged for a period when we were all together at BBC, and then things move on and change. I think it's probably the nature of who we are, and it's the nature also of the sport, that other than the relationships of the people that you know and you enjoy seeing, it's quite difficult to stay on top of it if you're not immersed in it all the time. Yeah. So, you know, I don't go to all the Grand Prix. I will watch, of course, but I won't watch Friday practice, and I won't watch all of that sort of thing, because I'm not there at the event. If I'm there at the event, you're wrapped up in it. So it is an amazing travelling circus, which I guess was why it was so apt that you brought Cirque du Soleil, one of the most iconic travelling circuses, together with Formula One.
Well, you know, we do need to, in my opinion, move it on, because what we're having the opportunity as a guest here is not just about Flavio initially and then with Jordan, but where she moved on to from there. I mean, it's a story that girls often think about, how can I get into Formula One, or is there a role for me in Formula One? But when you actually look at the career path that Giselle has had, and remember that I knew her father, and it shouldn't be forgotten that her father was the first commentator, not just on Wimbledon or the boat race or whatever, but he did Match of the Day. Barry Davis was a genius, and of course her own brother has set up Betfair, which is the most successful betting business, because it was it wasn't a betting app, it was actually an exchange. So in other words,
Did you try and blag some money out of him?
Well, I tried, because he was such a sharp cookie. I never got a dime out of him. But actually, the unsung hero in that family is her mother, who was a BA girl, and it was when BA was absolutely on top of their game. The girls in the cabin were just absolutely awesome. Not saying that they're not now, but in those days, the ones that I remember, and her mother was one of them. She was a delightful lady. So she comes from a family that we all became involved. The Jordans and the Davises, I think there was a common bond. So I was naturally reluctant. When you've got to ask her, where did she go after me, and how abusive was I?
Well, can I just come in? Because I think Eddie says, people often ask, did I get into Formula One or sport as job-wise because of Dad? As you say, Eddie, Dad, you know, he's done Olympic Games and football and myriad of sports, World Cups. I mean, you name it. There's hardly anything he hasn't done. Ice skating. I remember him learning how to do ice skating and then doing Torvilandin, which was one of the highest viewing audiences that the BBC had ever had.
Recently, and I was reminded of that's where they did
exactly.
To the music was it
Ravel's Bolero, I think it was. Yeah,
God, I remember watching that. That would be 83,
something like that, and it was just the viewing figures were huge. I think it's something like 17 million. If I'm not mistaken. But so yeah, that was Dad. But that was always in the background, his sport. So, you know, when something's in the background, like you do take it in by osmosis. But actually, you mentioned Mum, and you're so right, because my mum, who worked, as you mentioned, for British Airways, at a time where travel had more time, and people dressed up to travel, and the stewardess had time to meet and greet and talk to the passengers in a way that just isn't possible anymore. And looking at the jobs I ended up doing, which were about people, which were about helping people to meet other people and achieve things in communication in my specific circumstance. But I learned a lot of that from Mum, I think. So it was a combination of the being able to be in a room full of people you don't know and just get on with it and talk to people and be persuasive and stand up for yourself. It was a lot Mum and then Dad that taught in the background. Yeah. Yes, but sorry, David, you were going to go off. Well, you were about to ask me about moving on from Jordan the day when I had to finally go. It was heartbreaking, of course.
Well, I'm still a little bit in shock. I hadn't appreciated it.
You ran away from me.
Well, I'm still in shock that you spent so many years at Jordan, because, you know, you're an intelligent lady. I can't believe that you put up with this nutter for so long. But
I fought
and a mix
hard
of drivers along the way.
Really?
I fought hard
he did.
to keep her.
He did.
What,
he
did
did
he
actually.
offer you
I think
the
he got a
first pay
bit
rise
sticky
in
for a while.
5 years?
I think it's another one I put to the back of my mind. I think he did try to get money out of the IOC, didn't you? What did you try?
Of course I did.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, it was this cheeky bastard, Jack Rocker. He came and he said, I am the IOC, which is the Olympic Committee. And I said, yeah, what can I do for you? He said, well, I've been speaking to Giselle Davies and we'd like to take her onto our team. I know she has an agreement with you for the next year, but we'd like her to start now. And so he was so bulgy, not so bulgy, but, you know, the IOC and the Swiss, they felt that they were all so important. And I said, well, I don't give a monkey's actually here, Jack. What's in this for me? And so what's in this for the team? And of course they had to pay, but they didn't pay in the end. What he did do was offer me an enormous amount of tickets for a future Olympic Games. Wasn't that what it was?
That.
So here was I at the front of all the Olympic Games flogging. I was the number one tout.
I'm sure you were.
I was not. David.
Anyway, was that just a natural opportunity to move on? You'd achieved what you wanted to in Formula One, and it was the next challenge. Is that part of your makeup?
I think people say you make your own luck, but I have had definitely luck of being in the right place at the right time. The start with Benetton worked well, but then I was in the right place at the right time with people moving on to end up at Jordan at a good time, as I've mentioned, with all the wins that we had in that time, and actually breaking the top four, I think, since 1989. It'd been 4 teams, and then Jordan came through and we won. So it was a good time to be there, and the years went by very fast. And then I think Formula One gives you that platform fundamentally. People love it and they followed it. And because of that, I got a call from a headhunter saying, we're looking for the Director of Communications for the International Olympic Committee. And I remember when they called thinking, oh yeah, the British Olympic Association, that's amazing, that would be the Olympics. And then thinking, oh, hang on, she said the International Olympic Committee, that's in Switzerland, that's a whole other gig. That's... Yeah. So, and I went along to the interview and she said, she was a very good woman, but she said to me at the end, well, yeah, lots of nice things, but you lack, I think you're a bit young and you lack gravitas. That was the red rag to the bull. The minute she said that, I really wanted that job. Yeah. Because, you know, so I wrote her an email saying, what do you mean lack gravitas? But isn't the IC trying to come into a new era? It had a new president. And anyway, I made my case and she very kindly put me forward for the last round of interviews and I got the job. And so then, yes, we had to negotiate because it was mid-season, just after the Salt Lake City Games. Well, it was mid-season,
so I said, not a chance in hell. I don't care who you are, Jack. So Jack was ringing me, and of course, I had no real idea, nor did I care, that he had an impression of himself that was far greater than I felt he deserved. However, it came down to the negotiations of various little things. But, you know, I realised 5 years at Jordan had probably played itself out, and I was very keen. And I remember speaking to Giselle, and she was keen for it to happen. So I said to her, let's try and negotiate the best possible deal. So let's say she was on 30 grand a year at Jordan, but she went from that to 150 grand a year, living in Lausanne with a Mercedes.
It's amazing how you remember the figures. It's amazing how you remember those figures.
Every last time.
Oh my word!
Talking about money, I remember.
He's a numbers man.
He's pretty much.
So I went from 30 to 150, plus a Merc car, plus an apartment, and ironically, the girl she shared an apartment with, I used to ski with her. Her father, her husband is the notary public in Courchevel, isn't that? It's an amazing story. Yeah. And so I'm saying, Jesus, this is all too much for me. I can't cope with it. This is more money than I'm earning myself, for Christ's sake, and I've just got her the job. Anyway, I will say one thing in her favour, and somebody that we should have on the show at a future time, which is Sepp Coe. As we know, who lives in Monaco, and his daughter works for Red Bull on the communication side as well.
Maddie.
Absolutely. Gorgeous lady. And but Sepp Coe has always pulled me aside and always said, Britain would never have got the Olympics without the steadfast and the push from Giselle Davies. So well done to you. In hindsight, I know it's a long time ago, but having the Olympics to Britain was hugely important. So whatever you did do to
large
achieve
compliment.
A very large compliment that we probably have to scratch from this recording, given that I was totally neutral in all seriousness, because I was at the International Olympic Committee, don't forget. Okay. Now, it very much helped that I had a French grandmother as well as others. So I was in that race. That's what we're talking about. With 5 cities bidding, I was indeed there, and the story that you're telling has a different version insofar as every story has a different version.
Shut up, David.
I had no sway on anything and was absolutely neutral, impartial. Thank you. That's the word. Totally impartial in this game. But in that final moment, when the president has to read out opens the envelope to say which city has won. most people felt that Paris were going to win it. And so the photographers were in front of the Paris team. And there was hardly anyone in front of the London team. And so I just chose with a couple of my colleagues, because we had to sort of share ourselves between them, where we were going to go in order to sort of keep the photographers down below the TV camera lens. So I was there sitting in front of Seb and Sir Keith Mills and David, the whole London team. And of course, the president read out London. And all the photographers came bounding over and nearly knocked the few of us who were sitting there all over. So I think Seb just remembers that I was sitting in front of him, one of the few who was in front of London, not in front of Paris.
Well, he holds you in very high esteem, I must tell you.
Well, that's very nice.
And he recalls that particular incident. And then, to be fair, go on after that, because this is where I feel that, you know, from a businesswoman, and this is different to Formula One, what I'm so impressed about you is you didn't just stop there, then you had a family, you got married, but then you went to do the World Fair or whatever you did in Dubai, and then you worked for Sheikh Mohammed with Falcon Racing and the horse racing, of course, with John Ferguson, who we both know very well. And now you are the chief executive of the lottery in Britain, for heaven's sake. Come on, Giselle.
You know what's so great about Eddie is that he always promotes you wonderfully. I mean, you know, I'm not sure what the current chief executive of Ulwin, who are operator of the National Lottery, will hear if she hears that.
I don't care as far as I'm concerned. Giselle is the CEO.
If I wanted to go for that job, I make sure that you do the PR for me, because that would be good. But no, we have an excellent chief executive who's a woman, and she's doing a great job running Ulwin. But yes, I work for Ulwin, who run the National Lottery, which is, again, has a big connection with sport, but also with the arts, with community, with heritage. It makes some £30 million a year, just helping National Lottery funded causes a week. 30 million a week. Fantastic. So, you know, it's a great treasure for the nation.
That's where we have something in common. As we've got many things in common, actually. Our love-hate relationship with Eddie.
No, she doesn't have any hate relationship.
It's just keeping him to the facts and to the truth. He's a wonderful embellishment, which can sometimes serve you well, but other times you just think, no, he's going to get us into trouble because he's got it muddled.
I do love you, EJ. But Carol Comerick, who is the founder of Ulwin, is my partner in a foundation called More Than Equal, which is there to help and support and guide young girls from karting all the way towards, hopefully one day, finding the first female Formula One world champion.
Absolutely.
So you've obviously met the man, very inspirational, very much about diversity and inclusion, and very much someone that when he commits to something, and I'm sure all of those great causes that are supported by the National Lottery get wholehearted support.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, Giselle, we're coming. I'm not prepared to let you say anymore because everything so far has been brilliant, and
he doesn't want the truth to come out.
I don't want the truth getting in the way of a good story here. Anyway, DC, more questions?
Well, look, conscious of time, really appreciate you coming to Eddie's humble abode here in Londinium. The royal family rent some outhouses from you, and
yes,
this is it. You can see just how much he managed to nick away from Formula One when you earn away from Formula One. So you've already said that you're not really following what happens in the world of Formula One right now, but it's a sport that when you meet people, you tend to meet them again because it's a sport of hardworking high achievers. Other than all of the great examples of the work you were able to do during your time in Formula One, is there any other sort of standout memories, any other life lessons, any words out there for the young boys and girls that might be listening, hopefully old enough to not be offended by Eddie's language, that could inspire them to work towards a sport like Formula One?
Yeah, I mean, one of my big takeaways is don't worry if you don't know a lot about a certain subject. If you are trusted by people and you show you have potential, they will teach you the ropes of that thing. So I knew nothing about Formula One before I started, but learnt a hell of a lot in it. We didn't talk at all about the drivers. I worked with a lot of drivers: Damon Hill, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, Jarno Trulli, Giancarlo Fisichella, to name but some of them. And actually, I love listening to Ralf Schumacher on your earlier podcast.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
I mean, and you know what? A wonderful young... he was 22 when he was driving for Jordan. So he was young, I was young. We were both kind of naive. He was a bit stroppy. I was trying to be bossy. So we didn't particularly have a fantastic relationship then. But I heard him on your podcast and thought, I'd love to see Ralf again. So it's a lovely... I think the takeaway there
hold that thought.
is it good.
Don't make it a reality.
Giselle, one question now that you bring that up. Was it you or Ian Phillips or the two of you collectively together contrived to try and put Jordan, or Katie Price as she was known, and Ralf Schumacher together? What was...
I put that firmly. Ian Phillips was the creative genius behind that, I'm sure.
Actually together as
I
boyfriend
think
and
they were
girlfriend
for a while.
period of
Yes,
time.
yes.
Were they?
I think that I can't remember.
I think Katie
I can't
put it
remember
in
if
her
it was
book.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
I haven't
well,
read a book.
Yeah, well,
couldn't say.
I only read that part because it was making
Funny, I
fun of
haven't got
Ralph,
round
and I
to
needed
reading
all the
that.
armoury against my opposition.
You were just jealous because your name didn't come up in the book
Not
for
at all.
once.
No. Not at all. Not at all. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think at this point we have to say thank you so much, Giselle, for joining us to live your days of the wild rock and roll world of Jordan Grand Prix. And to our listeners, remember, you can send your questions to ffs@whisper.tv. And if you'd like to hear me and EJ answer more of your questions, sign up to the FFS Club, where you can listen to special bonus episodes.
Giselle, forget about him for a moment, but I'm overjoyed the fact that you've taken your time, come to see us. I know I've been hounding you for the last year, 6 months, 9 months, whatever it is, to come and join us. And the fact that you're here, I am so overjoyed. I'm delighted because I think yours is a special story to say. In other words, it was 5 years at a time when Jordan was at its height. And I suppose it's easy to recall the good times but there were bad times too. And we know afterwards that the funding sort of went away from the team. But I have such great memories, and Giselle, you are at the forefront of those memories. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for allowing me this trip down memory lane, because I've enjoyed it immensely. And the books that I got out from the back of the cupboard are now staying firmly on display.
Very impressed, aren't you,
at
Dave?
home.
It's an impressive array of your work, actually.
Well, our work. No, I did.
No, I didn't do one piece of this.
Yeah, I bossed you
I
into
didn't doubt
being there
that
for
at
the
all.
pictures.
You were being
and
very
these are definitely
generous.
all your cars and so on. But yeah, it was a team effort. That was what was fun.
So at this stage, just on behalf of the anchors, I have this horribly irritating
That's our listeners,
state.
by the way, just in case you think he's got a speech impediment.
Well, he's got to do his thing.
Anchors.
I have a growl. Have you heard the growl?
I've heard it, and I'm intrigued because that's new since our day. I mean, since
really?
the day we
The
worked
growl is
together.
very easy, and it goes something like, goodbye, everybody. Giselle, thank you for your presence. It's been absolutely a joy. Thank you. Giselle?
Thank you, Eddie, for the lot of fun then and now.
Oh,
And thanks, DC.
Wow, DC, you didn't get even mentioned.
I did.
I'm merely an observer in this particular love affair.
Oh, dear.
We should thank. In fact, we didn't actually thank DC because that crash you mentioned. Had you not crashed,
Thank you,
we wouldn't
Giselle.
have had the 1-2. I mean,
Thank
that was
you
the biggest thing
for
you've
being
ever
the bigger
given.
person,
Do you know what,
for
Jordan?
being the person
God
who
had
can
his
acknowledge.
way. God had his way. Had David not tried to blame poor old innocent man himself, Eddie Irvine, he blamed Eddie Irvine for running into the back of him. Eddie Irvine wasn't even close to him when you see the onboard stuff. He's miles away from him. But DC always has to have some scapegoat. And in this case, it's usually me. But in actual fact, he's the only person that should have won every Grand Prix that he ever entered into. Sadly, and rightfully, he only won 13 of them. Oh, let me have a look. Has he got a
There
picture?
you go. There's a win
Yeah, but you're
for
not in the-
Mika, my teammate.
You were the team that was right. You know, we were untouchable. I was good friends with your equivalent to me, Anna Guerrier. She's a dear friend still, and but you know,
interesting
you guys were on
enough, I've
another
just
level,
seen
from
your
everything from your
photograph.
motorhome to your performance on track. But you know, we had fun. We had fun being the David to that Goliath, definitely.
It's something that life has massive changes in it. And that's why it's so nice for us to be able to, some 25, 30 years in the past, being able to come together. And a photograph you've just put up there is one of Ron Dennis. And Ron and I never really quite ever saw eye to eye. I had huge respect for him for what he was able to achieve. But we were at a great friend's 70th birthday, Angie Rutherford, last Sunday. And Ron was there. I can tell you that I have not seen such a change. The guy is kind, considerate, caring, speaking when spoken to and not being bulgy. He was a different Ron Dennis. You'd have been so impressed.
Did you see him on Hard Talk recently? He did
No.
the
Oh, wow.
and he actually handled, I think, that whole thing fantastically well, because inevitably they asked over the Spygate. There was an issue where some Ferrari designs ended up associated. There was issues over his $100 million fine, not his, but McLaren's $100 million fine, and also about how he came to leave the team. And I thought he handles it all fantastically well, because you're not given a lot of time on that show.
No, it's tough.
We won't go into that. Actually, it might be something to bring up at a later stage, because there is it for sure. When Max Mosley penalised him, the president of the FIA at the time, the penalty was 10 million. However, he was so apparently, according to the FIA, so aggressive and so in your face that they said, "Oh, forget this 10 million, make it 100 million," and that's what happened. So there was a bit of a feud inside McLaren at the time, but we must talk about that in the future. Anyway, Giselle, you don't need to hear about this kind of crap, but and I am mindful of the time it is. Can I have a look at that?
Yeah,
because the first one is amazing.
That's you and Brian Ferry. I think that's how we launched the magazine. Such fun.
Oh God, yeah. Cool looking guy, that Brian Ferry.
It's great.
And this one, the first 10 years.
Huh?
Yeah. And I mean, some of this thing is hilarious.
It's just notes from back in the day or something.
This one. You talked about leaving from Benetton. So this is a fax. I mean, how archaic is that? To a friend that I happened to come across. Since I saw you, there have been big changes here at Benetton, which was not able to discuss. In short, Flavio Briatore, mercurial as ever, is panicking about our poor performance. He has decided we need 2 people in our PR department, not 3. The good news is I'm not the person they want to get rid of. And so it goes on.
No way.
Yeah. One day, maybe I have to write the book one day.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, but it's because of that I went to Jordan. So it was a good...
So bless you, Flavio, in disguise.
Yeah, and then there's this hilarious insert about...
Your notebook from back
this
then?
was my notebook from back then, so we'll not be leaving this behind.
I'm worried about you.
It has... I'm going to read you one more hilarious excerpt.
I can only dream that I was in a little corner
I
of
didn't
your
know
notebook.
DC well enough. That's the sadness.
Is there any pages not filled in and we can just backdate?
Yeah. This hilarious thing about taking
be
Gerhard
afraid
Berger in my car and him being worried. I'm just going to... Can I read you this? I know we've got to go. It's hilarious. Major coup of the day was managed to get Gerhard into my car and drive him to the main gate and then meet up with the guys from Sky who interviewed him in the car as they drove to the village. I couldn't believe I managed to do this. Gerhard had kept 2 journalists waiting for 1.5 hours. And eventually, when he came back to the motorhome, I told him, "You have to be here for the interviews." He said, "Have I got a new boss?" Anyway, it goes on like that. And then it says how driving him away when all the fans were squashing up against the car, brackets, my car, exclamation mark, that had a tiny Renault. It was Renault, because it was Renault. To get autographs was mad, exclamation mark. And the way back, I pulled out in front of a lorry who had seen me and was letting me through, except Gerhard hadn't seen this and took fright. I laughed that he should be scared of my driving.
If you think so.
I mean, the entry of a 27-year-old is quite hilarious.
I'm very pleased. You'd be fearsome in a divorce case, wouldn't you? If you turned up with something like that in front of the judge, you'd have no chance. Jesus, I'm glad I didn't marry you.
It's been fun finding the old...
Better, glad you didn't marry me.
Are you expecting an answer on that one?
We all are.
We've had enough of that. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.